Hey, welcome to the Milwaukee Music Lessons podcast. My name is Alex Bennett.
And I'm Robyn Bennett.
And we're bringing here with episode number 11. We've got kind of an interesting topic today. We are going to talk about instruments that are easier to learn versus harder to learn. I think it might be a little bit more complicated than just the surface level. So we'll get in. We'll start with first the stuff that like we teach here, which would be like guitar, drums, piano, voice, and then we might even expand out a little bit and see where we go from there. So
Sure.
We had talked a little bit beforehand. So the thing that kind of got me thinking about this topic was I was talking with another guitar teacher, and he kind of said to me, he was like, you know what, I think that for compared to most instruments, guitar might be one of the ones with the toughest learning curve at the beginning.
Yeah, I think initially, like learning where all the notes are is much more difficult on the guitar because it's not like the piano where it's all just laid out right there. Mm-hmm. You know, you can learn, here's A, you can learn one note and then you can figure out where all the other notes are in relation to that. But with the guitar, you have to do that 6 times. Like you can learn, hey, this string is the E string, and then I hit 1 fret, and now it's an E sharp, and now it's an F, and now it's a G.
Sure, and there's a lot of crossover going on too, right?
E sharp is an F, sorry.
When you, well, that's true. So we'll get into the semantics later. But like, you know, if you play the 5th fret of the low E string, that's also the same note as the open A string.
Right.
And so there's a lot of crossover that happens there too. So if you're just purely trying to learn even just the notes, it's like, oh, you can play this in the same spot on multiple places. And that's That's true of pretty much all stringed instruments. Like all stringed instruments have that problem. But even outside of that, just the pure mechanics, you know, that one of the reasons that I think a lot of parents like to do piano as a beginner instrument is because piano is much less mechanically intensive. You know, the piano itself does most of the work for you. Like it's a machine designed with a series of levers and hammers that hit the strings. Right. And so there's never any doubt about whether or not...
You hit it and it's going to play for the most part.
There's never any doubt about whether or not the note is going to sound good so long as you just hit the key. Mm-hmm. Whereas on the guitar, it's like, you know, first you have to be able to hit the right string and hold the right string, and then you have to be able to hold it in the right place and press it hard enough in order for that to happen. Yeah. And if you're trying to play chords, it gets even more complicated because
you got to do it multiple
times,
multiple fingers,
and oftentimes you have to avoid touching unnecessary strings and things like that.
Yeah, that was my problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
small hand problem.
Sure, yeah. Not saying that it's impossible with small hands, but if you have smaller hands, it is more difficult, right? Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, I think when you like think about guitar, and this is what the other person I was talking with was saying to me, was that like that first 6 months of guitar is way more difficult than say the first 6 months of piano.
I can see that, yeah. Where with piano, once you get started, you know, it's less about the mechanics and more just about, can I make my fingers do what I want them to do? But there's not as much little things that you're worried about your fingers doing as you would on guitar. Like on piano, it's mostly just keep your fingers curled.
Right, yeah.
Which is so hard for a lot of people, you know, or like keep your wrists above the piano instead of like hanging below. It's more of like the positioning aspect of it that people just get tired of.
Yeah, definitely. And I think too, it's way easier to, you know, you can play a lot of really simple melodies on piano
pretty simply,
too.
Yeah.
And so for people who are maybe not like, maybe they're just testing the waters, you know, the piano is certainly more appealing in that regard.
Yeah, I think it's more approachable.
Definitely. And I think that's probably why you see a lot of parents, too, who are like, this is why...
We're going to do piano first.
It's the starter instrument, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's...
Yeah, once it gets down the road, when you have to start bringing stuff together, and it's more of the... okay, now we have to do 2 hands at the same time, and you got to get your pedal going. That's where it starts getting a little bit more complicated for the for the piano. I feel like the learning curve at the beginning isn't very steep, but as you progress, it starts going uphill.
Right, and that's where I think it gets complicated because, on the guitar, you can learn like a small number of chords. Like let's say even if for skip bar chords, which is the bane of a lot of people's, frustrating for a lot of people, especially if you play acoustic guitar too. But the bar chord, it's very difficult on the hands. But realistically, you can learn like 4 chord shapes, and then you can play anywhere on the neck.
Yeah.
But even with guitar, it's like if you just stick with open chords, then you have a capo that you can move in places, and that opens up a lot of possibilities as well too.
Yeah.
And so for many people, it's like they learn like the same 8 chords, 7-8 chords, and then they're able to just capo, wherever they want to go, and they can learn a million billion pop songs. So.
Do you think that the guitar is one of the easiest to like hack your way into playing guitar? Like you learn a couple of shapes and then you can play all of them, or you use the capo and then you can play all of them. Yeah,
and there's also a lot of common reoccurring patterns, right? Like if you're trying to learn a scale, for example, and you're trying to learn scales on guitar, like the major scale, there's like a small number of shapes. Like you could realistically learn one shape to play the major scale, and then just transpose that same pattern anywhere on the neck. Whereas, like, if you go to piano, you have to learn the different combinations of, like, black and white keys. And so, so I think there's, like, an uneven distribution where it's, like, to start on guitar is really, really rough. And then you get past that, like, first 6 months to a year, and things really kind of open up themselves to what you can and can't do. Versus, like, piano, the first year, I would say, is relatively easy. But then beyond that, if you're trying to get into, like, creative composition, or you're trying to learn, like, scales and understand more about why stuff works, it's still easier to visualize on the piano, but actually, like, constantly working, like, I feel like guitar, you don't have to constantly work out the math. You can kind of, there's a reason there's, like, in the 90s and the 2000s when the internet started taking over and you found all these tabs, like, there's a lot of, a lot more homemade guitar players in that era. And that's just because you can learn it without having to learn as much of the theory or having to know it as intensely. And you can just kind of get right to the meat of it.
Sure.
I certainly found that true for myself. Like I did 2.5, 3 years of really not knowing a whole lot of theory, just kind of learning whatever I could learn on the guitar. And then I went to college and learned all the theory to kind of support it.
Which instrument do you think is better supportive of learning the theory, the guitar or the piano?
I think it's got to be the piano.
Is it because of the way it's laid out?
Yeah, definitely. And
I feel like you can see relationships between intervals and things a lot better on the piano.
Definitely. I mean, I have guitar players who, when they're trying to, like, calculate out scales and stuff like that, they're actively they have a printouts of a piano sheet.
Oh, really?
In their
like
notebooks.
Visualizing. That's so funny.
And they're, like, trying to math it out, and they're just, like, looking at the piano keys as a visual aid. So I think that's
funny.
Yeah, I think that kind of self explains what I'm trying to get to. So.
Yeah. So we talked about piano and guitar quite a bit. I want to talk just a little bit about voice and drums because I have a little bit of experience in both of them.
Sure.
If you're more mathematically / rhythmically inclined, I think it's a little bit easier to learn the drums just because the rhythms make more sense to you. Because rhythm is basically a very giant portion of drumming. And then... but once you add in more drums, all of a sudden you're not just playing one instrument, you're playing like 5 or 6. And then you have to coordinate them all together. So people say like drum set is one instrument, but I like to think of it as you're playing multiple instruments at the same time.
That's true.
Because then you have to coordinate all 4 limbs. That's what's difficult about the drums, is that initially if you start out with just a snare, that's not too bad because then you're really just focusing a lot on holding the sticks and rhythm and really getting that left, right kind of a thing in rudiments. But then once you expand beyond there, that's where it becomes a lot more complicated.
I guess it depends on where you're coming at it from. You know, you came from more of like a marching band, like drumline perspective, and so that's where you started. Whereas
I was just classical all the way. I played one instrument at a time.
Whereas I came from the exact opposite perspective. I started kit first.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about when you start with kit is that you do learn, like, you don't learn the entire kit at one time.
Yeah.
You primarily focus on like kick, snare, and hi-hat.
Sure.
And the principle behind that is that those are the three more
essential.
Yeah, they're the essential pieces. They're the most articulate.
Yeah.
You know, the snare's got like
the
where
snap.
You hit it,
Yep.
how hard you hit it, right? The kick obviously has the low end held down, and then the hi-hat has the perspective of like you can hit it in different ways. You can hit it with the edge of the stick, the tip of the stick. You can, you know, do it open or closed, or there's like levels in between there, right? It's very dynamic in that respect. And so it's like if you can learn to play those three pieces, then everything else is just an extension of that. And so I think when you think of it from that perspective, it's like, there is a separate skill of like understanding when and why and how certain things are going to be played. Like when do you go to the toms? When do you go to the ride? When do you go to the crash?
Sure.
You know, how long do you stay there for? And some of that is genre specific. But like, I think of that more as an arrangement thing as opposed to a skill thing or like a technical aspect. Because I think, again, you can learn all of your essential, you know, you can learn how to do like single stroke and double stroke rolls, and you can learn all of your paradiddles.
Yep.
You can do different
all
combinations.
The rudiments and stuff.
All the rudiments. You can, you know, learn how to do like flams and ghost notes and all that type of stuff on the main three. And then it's just a matter of just making sure that your limbs can coordinate where you want them to go.
Yeah, it's interesting because I learned like all of those instruments separately as a classical percussionist. You know, in a concert band setting, you learn all of them separate. So, I mean, I have played pieces where I've got to play several drums at once, but it was just like with my hands.
Sure.
So I'm only ever doing two at once, you know, if necessary. Or, I mean, you play with all the toys, you got like a triangle and a whistle, and you've got this cymbal over here, and, you know, one person can play like 7 toys, which is a lot of fun. But again, you're only ever really trying to play 2 or 3 at a time if you can manage multiple sticks in one hand.
Sure. I think where the challenge of the kit comes in compared to a lot of other percussion instruments is that, like, especially if you're in your standard band, rock, pop, country, whatever, you're like the backbone of everything. And so there is no forgiveness if you mess up. You know, if you're like in a lot of other percussion areas, you're just a piece of a larger ensemble.
Sure.
Versus like you're
not
kit,
essential.
The kit is like you're part of already a very small team, probably anywhere from 3 to 6 people on that stage. And so in those smaller scenarios, you know, if anybody messes up, and of course the nowadays, like, people have gotten so used to very tight rhythms because of just like the standard that's been set, whether that's the increase in talent of the people at the position, or if that's the you know, now we have a technology called quantizing that allows you to basically ensure that all of your instruments land almost exactly on the beat every single time. And so there's a higher standard nowadays. And so, like, your mistakes stand out way more.
Yeah.
And of course, you know, if you're a drummer and like you're drumming throughout probably 90% of the song, if not the entire song, then you have to always keep the beat going. And you always need to know, like, where are the spots where we're changing the accents? Where are the spots where we're doing different like specific band hits, or when are we changing the rhythm here? Do I need to switch from the crash to the open ride to the hi-hat, to whatever, like, is this a floor tom rhythm, and knowing like, okay, where does the kick drum land here? Is there a different snare pattern that goes on in this spot? Where is there a specific fill that needs to happen? Like, it's a lot of little things.
I feel like the kit definitely gives more conductor vibes.
Definitely.
But if it's like the combination between it's the combination between a conductor and a composer.
Sure.
Combined, because not only are you making those things happen, but you have to creatively come up with rhythms or fills to make sure, be like, hey, we're moving on to the next section, or hey, we're going to repeat that again. I know if you're in like a jazz band, it's like, okay, we're going to play this one again. Okay, now we're going to go to the next section. So this fill means play it again. This fill means go to the next one. So not only are you conducting the band with the sound that you're doing, but then you have to be creative in, okay, where do I fit in the band at this point? Do I need more low end? Do I need more mid? Do I need more high? Like you said, where are the accents going, and which of the 7 instruments I have here is best to fit that duty?
Yeah, and I think the drums, too, at the end of the day, probably have a lot more creative freedom in what they're allowed to do. You can add a lot as a drummer, or, like embellish a lot more as a drummer compared to most other instruments. And so, when you have that freedom, you're like it's a, great power comes with great responsibility.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword kind of a thing.
It is. But if you have the patience and the skill and the willingness to like try stuff, and I think sometimes that can be intimidating to people. Some people are just like, we're gonna play it exactly like the record, and some people are like, we're gonna do the record plus 50%. Yeah. So, what about voice? Like, where do you feel about voice?
Voice is hard because it's such an intimate one. It's not something where you can say, oh, I see what went wrong. You just have to push harder with that finger on the fret, or you weren't close enough with that, because you can't see the mechanism and you need to turn on this muscle a little bit more. Like, it's not really something that you are able to consciously be like, oh yeah, I'm going to thicken my folds here for this one, and then I'm going to turn that one off and turn on this muscle. So it's a lot more psychological.
Yeah.
Because you can't physically be like, okay, I'm going to bend this muscle. You can see it and you can make it do what you want. So there's something different about not being able to see it, where you kind of have to use metaphor or nuance to explain, here's what I need more from you, or I need less of that.
Yeah.
So in that respect, it's very difficult, because you can't, as a teacher, say, I see exactly where you're going wrong. You know what I mean? So fixes are not quick and they're not easy. And a lot of it is, another thing that makes it hard is the upbringing of whoever the student is. If they were brought up listening to a bunch of music and vocally exploring, they have much better pitch recognition and all those things than if they didn't do that in school. Then they feel that they have, what's that word for when you cannot find a pitch at all?
What, like tone deaf?
Yeah, tone deaf. So going through college, some people have the philosophy that really no one is tone deaf. They just haven't learned how to hear the note and then how to match it with their voice, because at some point it just becomes more of a muscle memory.
Sure.
You're connecting that signal from your brain to whatever muscles are in here, and being able to tell, okay, am I flat? Am I sharp?
Yeah.
So a lot of it comes to how are you brought up? And that will, if you were brought up singing and playing and exploring your voice, then it's a lot easier to learn to sing than if you weren't brought up that way. It's just, I'm not saying that it's impossible. It's just a more difficult entry.
And that willingness to experiment is really hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, it is.
When, as you mentioned at the beginning, the voice is such an intimate instrument. And because of its intimacy, people get embarrassed easily.
Yeah.
People don't want to jump out on a limb.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, most of the greatest accomplishments that you're ever going to have on your instrument are going to come from you walking out on a limb.
Yeah.
And having the courage to try something.
Yeah.
But, and it's so funny to me because I think so many people, especially when they're at the beginning phases, like everybody around them is supportive. Like, go get it. They want to see you succeed.
Right.
And yet that is when people feel like they're at their most vulnerable. And I wish I would see people vocally have more courage to jump into, just go. I mean, gosh, some of the greatest songwriters, singers of all times are people with terrible voices. You look at Tom Petty did not have a great voice. Bob Dylan did not have a great voice. B.B. King did not have a great voice.
You're going to get some haters.
Probably, but that wasn't what sold you on them. It was their willingness to commit.
Yeah.
They're willing to go all in and put it all on the line.
Fake it till you make it.
And it's like acting, right? You got to go all in.
If you don't
gotta
go
make it
all
believable.
in, exactly. Then it's not believable. It's like, I don't believe that you want this. And for so many people, the confidence is the biggest thing, really.
Yeah. Yeah, but confidence builds with experience. And successes and gradually increasing. But, this is all easier said than done, right? Like, you can't just say, be more confident and that will work. You can recognize the problem and still not know how to, overcome it in real time. So I think you just got to figure out ways to, psych yourself up. And for the record, I think this applies to many instruments. I think
for sure.
Vocals are the easiest example. But, I'd agree with most of what you said there. A lot of it was it's hard to dictate those little things, those little nuances, and so I think most of my vocal improvement came from just repetition, willing to go out on a limb, and then listening back to yourself. We talk about recording yourself
really
all the time, but
recording yourself.
Vocals, I would say, out of all instruments, benefits the most from it.
Yeah, because you sound so much different to yourself than to everybody else.
And you never want to be that person who goes on American Idol and thinks you're great stuff and then finds out that you're,
that you're not.
Yeah, exactly.
The last thing I want to say about learning to sing and use your voice is that there are so many things that go on in your body that contribute to your sound. So whether it's the breathing or if you're all your muscles are tense, those are things that also affect your ability to sing or to sing well. So and then the last one is trying to sound so much like someone else that you never discover your own voice. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. So I hear that a lot from my students. Not that they're trying to find what their own voice is. I try to find their voice because all I hear from them is who they're wanting to be.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. Yeah. I can appreciate that in my own way on guitar because I've met several other guitar players who are the same way, where just everything they do sounds like these three artists combined because that's all they ever do.
Sure.
And they've never really found themselves, So I've seen that enough. But
yeah.
Anyways, cool. All right. Well, I think at this point, the podcast is probably long enough. We always do this. We're always we can fit this in 20 minutes. And then 40 minutes later, here we are. So
that's true.
Anyways, thanks so much. I know it's been a little while since the last episode. And so sorry for a little bit of the delay. Life gets in the way. We got a baby on the way.
Yay!
That's exciting. So, we've been busy. Anyways, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in to our 11th episode. We really appreciate it. My name is Alex Bennett.
And I'm Robyn Bennett.
We'll see you guys in the next episode.
Bye.